So now to Washington, where war and peace are very much in the headlines today. The president pledged $10 billion from the United States for the effort at the first meeting of the Board of Peace overseeing the reconstruction of Gaza. This as he weighs possible military strikes against Iran. President Trump talked about where things stand right now since the U.S. struck Iran's nuclear sites months ago. Take a listen.
It went into Iran and it totally decimated the nuclear potential. And when it decimated that, all of a sudden we had peace in the Middle East because there was a black cloud hanging over the Middle East. And if that wasn't done, that cloud would have been there. And countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Qatar, countries like nobody could have signed. You would have had that threat. You couldn't have had peace in the Middle East. So now we may have to take it a step further, or we may not. Maybe we're going to make a deal. You're going to be finding out over the next probably 10 days.
So let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. So Ed, the president mentioned Iran. What else came out of today's meeting?
Well, that $10 billion contribution to this Board of Peace was certainly one of the headlines for sure, because it's unclear where exactly or what part of the federal government coffers that money's coming from. And it's on top of about close to $7 billion in commitments from other countries as well. So this thing is off to a pretty auspicious start with about 50 member countries and firm financial commitments from all of them. There were also announcements about plans for Egypt and Jordan to begin training new Palestinian police officers so that they can start taking the streets in the coming months and work towards the disarmament of the various militias and Hamas and other groups in the Gaza Strip. There was a lot of talk about developing Gaza's hundreds of miles of coastline for housing and for other commercial development, but no timetable put on that. And a real sense that this organization this board intends to do what it can to help Gaza. But the president also suggested that it could one day help deal with other crises around the world. Take a listen.
This has been, I think, will maybe be one of, if not the most important day of our careers. And we've had some pretty good careers up here, but this is something very special. And we're going to straighten out Gaza. We're going to make Gaza very successful and safe. And we're also going to maybe take it a step further where we see hot spots around the world. We can probably do that very easily. This is a tremendous group of powerful people and brilliant people. And I think that we can do things that a lot of other people would not be able to even conceive of or think of.
They went to great lengths to point out that this is a board that is backed by the United Nations, has been sanctioned by the Security Council, but various Trump administration officials, others close to the president, have said he actually one day sees this becoming, in essence, a rival to the United Nations, in that he believes it will be more effective, more fast-moving, and able to address real urgent concerns in ways that he believes the United Nations has not been able to now over several years. Reed.
Ed, I've got to ask you, because obviously this is another big topic when we talk about the president and we spin the globe. We know sources tell CBS News President Trump is weighing airstrikes on Iran, perhaps as soon as this weekend. What are you hearing from the White House?
Yeah, the date given to CBS News was as early as Saturday, but the conversations remain fluid as they weigh the political and the military consequences of either taking action or not taking action. Remember, now you've heard the president this morning suggest it could be another 10 days or so until he makes a determination. And as that happens, you've seen an incredible influx of U.S. military assets into the region. As you see here on this map, you've got the USS Abraham Lincoln already there, plus about 11 other major military aircraft. The USS Gerald Ford is just off the map there in Western Africa, on its way back into the Mediterranean to take position. And you have about 30 to 40,000 U.S. military personnel in the region on a regular basis, although many now have been sent to Europe or back here to the United States to get out of the way in the event of U.S. attacks and potential Iranian counterattacks. What would the United States hit? Well, the Israelis have raised concerns about Iran's growing ballistic missile program, so that's one potential target. There is also, of course, the nuclear-related sites that were hit last summer by Israel and the United States. You could conceivably see them go back to those or to others related to that program to try to eliminate them. If this is a broader campaign designed for regime change, it's going to require more than air power, and there's no clear indication yet, A, that that's being considered, or B, what that would involve from a military aspect. But it is, as you can see, in essence, preparations being made, across the Middle East for the possibility of this. It has hallmarks of what went on in Venezuela, where military assets were being pushed into the region as diplomacy was being attempted. If it fails, the president says there could be military action. Reed?
Watching it all and the timing. Ed O'Keefe live at the White House. Thank you so much. So let's go to CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. Charlie, U.S. servicemen and women, they are, as Ed just pointed out, very close to Iran. But the big question is the U.S. close to a strike?
Yes, that's the short answer. The United States is preparing for this and have been preparing for a number of weeks. Ed mentioned the Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln has been there for a couple of weeks now. That has been in position. There are 12 or so, maybe even more than that, destroyers and cruisers, and these are capable of launching Tomahawk cruise missiles at land targets. They're also good defensive weapons as well. Again, being there for a possible Iranian counterattack or retaliation, as we had seen, by the way. You know, the Iranians still, with the ballistic missile programs that they've got in place, that they've managed to save and actually rebuild during the last fight with Israel and then also with the United States. They're fully capable of reaching like Al Udeid, which is the United States' largest U.S. military air base in that region and within easy reach of some of Iran's weapons. So that is a serious threat and one that they're taking seriously. So they're in a position to strike Iran really at any moment, and that's why, as we reported yesterday, that is one of the options that's been presented to President Trump as early as Saturday, if he should so wish. Now, not optimal. Optimal is when you're going to see the Ford, as Ed mentioned. The Ford headed to the Mediterranean. That puts it within striking distance of Iran, and then also in a position for force protection. So you're going to have 2 aircraft carriers, and that's a big deal. You know, that's a decision that's not taken lightly. The Ford, if we have to remind folks, it was in the Caribbean. It was part of what was going on in Venezuela and the capture of Maduro. So it wasn't just floating around, you know, it was actively engaged. Before that, it was in European command. It's already on its 2nd or 3rd extension. And by, say, April, May, whenever it does get back home, it will have been at sea and deployed for one of the longest deployments in modern times. And that is not something that's taken lightly. So this is obviously, anytime you send a carrier into a place, it sends a message, it's a deterrent, but that is something that you're taking seriously because you're putting 2 carriers, all that personnel, the aircraft, the fuel. It's an incredibly expensive venture, and it comes with another 3 destroyers. So yes, it's a short question, but that's a larger answer for how prepared the United States is.
Expensive, very much staffed, and lethal, no? Talk to us about the capability, the firepower there.
Yeah, so, you know, when you think about everything the United States military does, and I've learned this over the years, and certainly while working inside the Pentagon, everything is done deliberately. You know, they put together strike packages. So they will have figured out which targets they want to hit. They will be looking, and they're looking now, by the way, we've seen a lot of activity about Iran's capabilities, where they're positioning or repositioning their own weapons systems. That will be part of the intelligence community, part of the Israelis who keep close watch over what's happening with Iran. So the carriers themselves, you're looking at F-18s and F-35s. These are the stealth fighter jets. And these are the ones that can do the bombing runs if you're going to launch an air campaign. I mean, look at what happened with the Houthis, right? There you had a carrier that was very actively involved in a bombing campaign that went on for several weeks. And I can tell you, people that we've spoken to, that is what the United States is preparing for. If it is decided that the U.S. will attack Iran, the United States military is preparing for a longer stretch. That the Iranians may see this as an existential threat to the regime, not a sort of one and done we saw at Operation Midnight Hammer when they went after Iran's nuclear facilities. This might be more of a widespread, and the Iranians will start firing back, and they've already threatened to fire back against its neighbors. So there will be an element of trying to protect Israel in the crossfire as well. So that is exactly what those carriers are there for, force protection and to launch strikes. And it's also why we've seen, and you and I have discussed it before, that we reported it, about these tankers, the aerial refuelers. A bunch more of those have gone to the region at that Al Udeid and around that, because those fighter aircraft, it's a long way between the ship and their targets, their selected targets, and back, and that's going to need a lot of refueling and a lot of coordination. As I said, every single step of what the U.S. military does is deliberate, it's planned out, it's costed, and that is why they don't just send ships into an area. Everything has got a specific assignment according to what they're anticipating.
And just in our small amount of time we have left, Charlie, what's the risk to Israel?
Oh, the risk is very high. I mean, the Iranians have already said that they're going to strike their neighbors, and of course they're going to try to strike Israel. And Israel is preparing for that as well. They've been moving around, the United States and Israel have been moving around their weapons defense systems. We all know about the Golden Dome, but as we saw last time, that can't catch everything. And what the Iranians did last time is they flood the zone. They put a lot of drones in the air and then fire these missiles. And those missiles are really hard to intercept, and they can't get through them all. They take priority over populated areas and military bases to make sure that those are the ones are prioritized on intercepting those missiles. But again, it doesn't catch everything. And if Iran really goes for it, doesn't keep any of the powder dry, that is certainly going to be a concern for the Israelis.
Tensions mounting and a ticking clock as we look to Saturday. Charlie